There was a police sergeant pulling me quite roughly to the side of the road and sort of against a building. And he said to me, "Look, you're quite openly Jewish, and I'm concerned that your presence here is going to antagonize the crowds."
The chair of the charity Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, Gideon Falter, is calling for the Commissioner of the Met Police, Sir Mark Rowley, to resign after an officer stopped him from crossing the street in London where a pro-Palestinian protest was taking place, describing him as openly Jewish. And Gideon, I'm pleased to say, is joining me now. Gideon, thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you for having me, Alexis.
Gideon, for people who have not seen the video, can you just tell us what happened?
Yeah, I was trying to cross the road whilst being Jewish, and the first I knew that something had gone wrong was when I suddenly felt hands on me, and I looked around and there was a police sergeant pulling me quite roughly to the side of the road and sort of against a building. And he said to me, "Look, you're quite openly Jewish, and I'm concerned that your presence here is going to antagonize the crowds. And so I am asking you to leave this area or face arrest." And I just couldn't believe what was happening. I sort of talked to him. I tried to talk to other officers. There was a whole crowd of police officers around me, and all of the officers seemed to agree. They all said similar things to me. And I realized that I was surrounded by a crowd of police for being Jewish. I was being told that I faced arrest for being Jewish unless I left. But everybody else was crossing the road, walking wherever they wanted to. It was busy London on a Saturday. No one else had a problem. It was just me for looking Jewish. And as they sort of detained me there, the crowd started to thicken as more of these marchers arrived. And instead of sort of marching past, they saw a Jew on the side of the road, and people stopped what they were doing and started to gather round and shout at me, "Scum, scum, scum." People were just shouting "disgusting," "Nazi," "lock him up," things like that. And none of them had a crowd of police around them. None of them were threatened with arrest. And I just thought, what on earth has London come to, that I am the problem? I am being treated like a criminal for being, quote, quite openly Jewish.
Why do you think he described you as openly Jewish at the time, Gideon?
Well, it was a Saturday. I'd been to synagogue in the morning. I was walking back. I was wearing my kippah, the sort of skull cap that Jews usually wear to synagogue and generally. I was carrying a small bag which you put your prayer shawl into after synagogue, and that had a Star of David on it, a few Stars of David on it. And so it was obvious to anybody who knows what Jewish people wear that I'm Jewish. And that seemed to be enough for the officer to take action.
Now, we should, of course, say that there was a pro-Palestinian march going on at the time in the street that you wanted to cross. Also, eyewitness reports are saying that about 100 metres away from where you were, there was a counter-protest to that march, a lot of Israeli flags being waved. Do you think that perhaps the police officer thought that you were part of the counter-march protest by the side of the road, or that he was concerned for your safety?
I mean, he had no reason to think I was part of a protest, counter-protest, or anything else. I wasn't wearing a sticker or a badge. I didn't have a placard or a sign or a flag or anything else. I was just walking around whilst being Jewish. And I kind of thought to myself afterwards, I wonder if this was a far-right march and a police officer spied out of the corner of his eye a black man walking along the road, whether the police officer would grab that black man, drag him to the side of the road, and say, "You're being quite openly black. You've got to get out of here or I'm going to arrest you."
Do you think he was doing it for your safety? Do you think he was trying to prevent any sort of coming together between yourself and the other marchers? Or do you think that he picked on you and stopped you from crossing the street simply because you were Jewish? Which of the two do you think is mostly what actually happened?
I mean, I feel that the Met are the frontline officers are not really to blame here. I mean, obviously, I disagree with what they did, but the frontline officers are being constantly put in this impossible position by their top brass. They're told that, there might be 100,000 protesters one day, and there are 1,000 police officers, and they've somehow got to maintain order. And amongst these protesters, you have people, and we've seen over the past few months, we've seen people dressed as Hamas terrorists. We've seen people running around with swastika placards. There was one placard, which I've seen a couple of times now, with a Star of David thrown in the bin and the caption, "Please keep the world clean." I mean, stuff that would not have looked out of place in 1930s Germany. And that's not hyperbole. That's exactly right. And I've seen all of this. The police are somehow expected to keep control of these marches. And instead of being given the powers to do so, and the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has powers. He can ban marches. He can put very strict conditions on them, so they can't be above a certain size and they can't go beyond a certain route, etc. Instead of using all those powers, he just lets them go as they want to, do whatever they want. And the frontline police officers are put in these impossible positions. So the where I lay the blame for all of this is with Sir Mark Rowley, because it's not like this is a new thing. He's had 6 months of this now to get the situation under control, to get the grip of it, to get his officers doing what needs to be done, and he hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, Gideon, it's also fair to say that in December you've also called for these marches to be banned. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I make no secret of it. I think after we saw a few of these marches, I mean, if you remember, October 7th, the worst anti-Semitic atrocity since the Holocaust, straight after it was happening, in fact, even as it was happening, we saw people out in the streets dancing, clapping, celebrating that this was going on. And then these marches started. And the kind of displays of anti-Jewish racism and glorification of terrorism that we've seen, I think just made everybody who saw them feel after a short while, okay, something needs to be done about this. My view of what needs to be done about this is a ban. And the reason for that is that the law says that if a march causes serious disruption to the life of the community, it can be banned. And I would ask, if not being able to cross the road is the reality of these marches, how much worse does it need to get before Sir Mark Rowley thinks a ban is warranted under the law?
Gideon, the Board of Deputies of British Jews say that they and other Jewish community leaders will meet Sir Mark Rowley this week. Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, your organisation, has not been invited. Is that correct? And if so, why?
All I've received from police is an email saying, essentially, are you going to go for a walk again on a Saturday? And if so, where? I have not heard anything from Sir Mark Rowley. It's very strange to hear that this meeting is being called by Sir Mark Rowley with other organisations. I imagine it's part of a scramble by him to save his job. It's very hard to imagine what exactly is going to be discussed at this meeting. Are they going to tell him what's happened, tell him how badly he's handled it? I suspect he knows all of that. So what's the point of the meeting? And I just find his handling of everything to be absolutely abject. We've had this victim-blaming statement that they put out saying my presence was provocative and we shouldn't have made what happened public because we put a dent in the confidence of Jewish Londoners. That's a direct quote. And they had to apologise for that, obviously. I haven't heard anything from Sir Mark Rowley. If there are meetings taking place, I haven't been invited to them. And I think it just goes to the point, really, which is that this is a man scrambling to save his job. It's a man who has not taken a grip of the situation and seems to be willing to do absolutely anything other than dealing with the mess that he is allowed to fester.
Gideon, thank you for giving us your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gideon Falter there, the chair of the charity campaign against anti-Semitism. Now, listening to that conversation with Gideon was former police chief superintendent Dal Babu. Dal, thank you so much for giving us your time. You were listening into the conversation there I had with Gideon. What do you make of the whole incident?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to correct some inaccuracies. The police have very, very strong restrictions on the marches. People have been arrested for anti-Semitism and racist remarks. So the idea that marches have been allowed to go on unfettered is untrue. There's conditions. The organisation will have to abide by those conditions, and the police are working very, very closely with British Border Deputies and the Community Security Trust when they develop the plan. So I think it's important to give some context to what we have seen, and this is not unusual, is that people have there are lots of Jewish people, and I think it's important to distinguish between people who support Israel and Jewish people who don't support Israel, who are on the marches. So there are many Jewish people who attend the marches. So I think it's important to give that accurate and context information.
What do you make, though, of Gideon's description that he was being singled out for being openly Jewish, which was one of the police officers said, look, you are quite openly Jewish. I don't think it's a good idea you cross the road right now whilst there's a pro-Palestinian march. What do you think of what Gideon's saying that, hang on, why is he being picked out for being openly Jewish when people walking past now? Again, I haven't seen the video footage, but he claims that people were hurling abuse at him by the side of the road. Can you see it from his point of view that he's just trying to get to the other side of the road, albeit whilst the march is going on, but he's trying to get to the other side of the road, and the police officers are more concerned with him than they are for people hurling abuse from the march?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that the police were more concerned about him than the people who were causing abuse. I think they'd have to do both. But the reality is that there was a counter demonstration against the pro-Palestinian demonstration going on. I mean, as an Asian person, I don't think I want to be in town when the EDL or other far right racist groups are marching, and it must stay clear. So I think this idea that you would have a black person wanting to cross over an EDL march is fanciful. You wanted to get your head kicked in.
But then are we saying that if you're Jewish, you should avoid central London when there's a pro-Palestinian march going on?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I think everybody's entitled to be in a place of safety. And the point I made was that you have Jewish people on these marches as well as
of course,
people.
Yeah.
So I think that's the point I made. And what's happening is that we've seen this on a number of occasions where people or groups have filmed themselves. I'm afraid the media don't really scrutinise the entire details of the footage that's then placed before them. And I think what you end up is one clip is then circulated, but people will often have vested interest in what they're trying to do. So I think it's important for the mainstream media to actually say, well, if there's 15 minutes of footage, can we see all of it? Remember last week we had, 10 days ago, we had a situation where a woman was in conversation with a police officer around anti-Semitic signs, and the suggestion was that the police officer was sympathetic, and the reality is that the person who was explaining had been arrested, but that was missed from the clip. That was not shown. So I think what the police will have to do is if people people are going to be in that area, the police might have to have additional resources so they're able to deal with any potential flashpoints that may occur.
Okay. Dal Babu, thank you so much for giving us your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's former Met Police Chief Superintendent Dal Babu. And just to back up what Dal was saying there, I did try and find the entire footage, but I also could not get hold of the entire footage other than what was available on the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism Twitter feed. So it is quite important to be able to see that footage unedited from beginning till the end. But unfortunately, that was not possible.